Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Anna Fiascone and Natalie Ryan.
On the listing side, I would say one of the most important things that we have to recognize going into a specific property is, what is our buyer pool? What's our buyer pool going to look like?
Every client's different, every property is different, every price range is different. And something that we have to do is really acknowledge that and understand that and then work from there. Because we don't treat every property, every client, every situation the same. You have to adjust to who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm John Sleeting, your host. And before I introduce our guest for today, I want to share with you a little bit of a plan for the summer, because I'm going to have a 4-part series going through mergers and acquisitions, exit planning, and the thoughts going into monetization events. We'll have 4 guests. We'll work through from a roll-up in media and advertising to a subsequent discussion regarding unsatisfying exits. The next one, as many of you listeners know, I chair the board for a family holding company, and we went through a significant liquidity event on behalf of the family last year. One of my fellow board members, who's the point person on the transaction, will join me in a conversation of navigating that from the board's view, as well as interacting with the entirety of the process. And then the 4th part of the episodes will be actually having an investment banker that represented that transaction and gaining the investment banker's perspective on what makes a good process. So these 4 parts of going through someone that was a CEO leading a roll-up to the second part, an unsatisfying exit, the 3rd part from the board's perspective, the 4th part from the investment banker's perspective, will fill up your summer of 2025. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Anna Fiascone and Natalie Ryan. Anna and Natalie are 2 luxury real estate professionals within the western suburbs of Chicago. We'll hit on a little bit of their introduction in terms of their just success from a sales perspective, but also from their view of values, from family, with their daughters, with their sons, working together, the perspectives that they bring from being a corporate attorney, as well as working at a major ad agency as a marketing executive and transitioning into luxury residential real estate. The 2 of them have phenomenal perspectives regarding family, engaging in the community, how the world is evolving around them, and why, even though we all may have houses or are aspiring to buy our first home, there's still a process, a discipline. The world is changing. There's settlements that took place within the National Association of Realtors in 2024, and they'll share perspective on all of these fronts. So with that, I look forward to this conversation, and thank you for listening in. Anna, Natalie, thank you so much for carving out the time to have this conversation today. I really look forward to just exploring both your journeys, which are unique into themselves, as well as residential real estate, especially within the luxury market. So before I turn the mic over to you, just a few things for our listeners to get somewhat familiar. And I'm going to read this off my notes because I can't memorize all these things. But over the last 4 years, you had a record-setting 9-figure amount in the market. So again, we're in Chicago. Western suburbs is the focus for you in the luxury market. 9 figures for listeners that haven't added up all the zeros. So well over $100 million of total sales and continuing to increase. In 2024 alone, you had the largest individual sale in a decade that took place in Willowbrook. 2023, you had one of the largest in the county then that took place. 2024, you were included in the ultra luxury report by Compass Real Estate, which you're affiliated with. You're on American Dream TV segments with HGTV. So your TV personality is not just being on a podcast here as well. So your expertise in the residential and the luxury space of the market is proven, right? So there's no question about that coming into this conversation. But help for listeners to start to understand a little bit more of first Compass, who you are, residential real estate, and talk about the professional side. And then we're going to come into the personal aspect. So Anna, why don't we start with you and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, John, for having us. This is very exciting. This is our first podcast.
But your TV personality, so this will be this is a breeze.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, we have been with Compass now for a little over a year. 2 years? August. Yeah. And it's been great. Compass is a wonderful company, and it's kind of shaken things up a little bit in the real estate world. It's a different, it has some different ideas, some different theories behind selling real estate and how to run real estate companies. And it's been really great learning and reinventing ourselves, even though we've both been in the industry for a while. I started as a real estate attorney, commercial real estate, worked at a REIT, and had a great experience there. But after I had my first daughter, realized that I wanted to switch over to selling real estate. I liked being, I thought I would like being in the working with people, negotiating one-on-one each day, being a little different. Anyways, it worked out. I like it. This is my 15th year. And it's been great. I had a partner for 10 years and she retired, and I really loved that partnership 2-person team. And so Natalie and I were at the same company, and we came together pretty organically, and it's worked out really well for 5 years now.
Great. Well, we'll come back to like law and transition from law into the bridge into real estate. Now, anything you'd want to add to the business side of what the two of you are doing?
Well, with Compass, we just recently, as Anna pointed out, came over to Compass from another brokerage, another large brokerage in the area that we both have a very long history with. Anna was there for 15 years, and I was there for about 8. And we made the switch not because we didn't like it there, but because Compass offered so much more for us. At this point, we have a very established brand identity for the two of us. I come from a background in marketing, so I've always been like fiercely protective of our branding and just making sure that things are going out all the time that are consistent and cohesive. Compass is wonderful in the fact that you have to be a certain caliber of an agent in order to be invited, if you will, to join the Compass brokerage. Whether that's a volume amount that you have to reach in order to be there, or number of years of service. You have to be a producing agent, and I'm not picking on a lot of other agents. I know we're all hearing about last year in the market in 2024, something like 76% of real estate agents did not even do one transaction, which means the balance was done by the rest of us that are out there. A lot of those are at Compass. Compass has a very interesting platform across the board. They're technology based, which isn't something that our clients necessarily need to know. They enjoy hearing that we have advanced technology to offer them, but they want to know what the output is. What does this mean for them if they're a buyer or a seller? Because sometimes if you're not doing both, you don't want to hear about the rest of it. You don't have the bandwidth or the time for that. Yeah. So we love the technology. We love the assistance. We love the different platforms that they have. Like we have a designated marketing person, PR out of New York. We have a designated manager in our office that works just with us on anything that we might need in terms of transaction or basically anything. Matt is our everything. He does everything for us. He's great.
Well, and the CEO, Robert Refkin, he is very much a forward thinker. You've probably seen him on the news a ton, that he's like the go-to guy to be interviewed anytime there's news in the real estate world. And Compass just rolled up Compass and Nat Properties. That was a recent merger. Okay. It was a really big deal. And you'll see him a lot on the news. And I'm sure we'll get into it. The NAR settlement, he has a lot of opinions on that. And he's predicting big things in terms of MLS essentially going away in the future, and just a lot of things, a lot of change.
So we'll come back to National Association of Realtors. We'll come back to the settlement discussion in a little bit. But first, your personal journeys. And Natalie, I want to come back to you. You talked about marketing and advertising, communication, everything that you need now. But you spent time in New York and Leo Burnett, and
Yes.
you would consider yourself a marketing ad executive as much as you consider yourself in luxury residential real estate. So take listeners back on this journey a little bit in terms of school, choosing that path, and then the transition, but what you learned from living around the world, spending a decade in New York City, and then coming back to the Chicago market.
Great. Yes. So I did attend the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. Go Illini. Where I met my husband.
There'll be a lot of listeners and people in our
Go
office who'll be
Illini.
happy to hear that.
Love the school. I actually have a son there now who's a sophomore as well. So it's an amazing school. When I was there, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. Coming out of high school, I moved a lot. So coming out of high school, I had actually had 5 years of the German language, which now I don't do much with. It's more of a party trick, I guess. But I do speak German, and I have a degree in German commercial studies from the University of Illinois. So in school, you had to decide if you were going to take more of a literature or history route with a language, or if it was going to be more business focused, which is what I did and studied abroad in Vienna, and it was wonderful. Because I did realize that just a degree in German for me wasn't going to be the only thing that was going to carry me into my next phase of life. I also have a degree in advertising and marketing. So those two together, combined, coming out of school, I went straight to Leo Burnett, their media division called Starcom, which was just basically in their infancy when they had started. I think maybe they were 2 or 3 years old, basically diversifying their media strategy and investment team from the rest of Leo Burnett, not because we needed to separate, but because we were getting a lot more business and had more trajectory to gain business from other companies that weren't necessarily using the Leo Burnett client services and creative vision.
Okay.
Not to say that they weren't amazing. We worked on some accounts that were, threefold, that we did everything for them, full shop. And then there were others, and I was on several different accounts with advertising with the media team, including the Philip Morris Tobacco account, which was our blue chip client at the agency. We did everything for them, soup to nuts, from the creative to client services to media, which was a great first account to be on there, despite the tobacco settlement and all of the horrible things that went along with that. But we handled the tobacco settlement, and then I moved on to new business from there, pitching new business for Starcom.
Okay.
And Sara Lee, everything from literally bras to sausage. Sara Lee is very diversified in their portfolio of products, everything from Kiwi shoe polish to Jimmy Dean sausage, hot dog, Champion athletic wear, and Playtex bras, everything. So you did kind of have to learn at that point, not to be all things to all people, but how to really pinch hit on something that could be slightly different and making sure that you're giving them a bullseye media plan based on what their needs are.
And so what do you look in your day-to-day work now? What do you reach back into in your experience set that you keep pulling in every day in terms of how you're communicating, target marketing on the sell side for families that you represent, but even on the buy side? How do you leverage that toolkit?
Right. So on the listing side, I would say one of the most important things that we have to recognize going into a specific property is, what is our buyer pool? What's our buyer pool going to look like? On one level, it's going to apply to everyone, right? This house is amazing. It's got all the right trend setting, move-in ready, that sort of thing. But the location, the layout of the house, proximity to downtown, first floor living. Is there space for someone that we think maybe someone who might have mobility issues might be able to live in this house? So we really have to think about that buyer pool and talk to our client about it, because at the end of the day, we don't need 1,000 offers. We need one amazing offer. And we recognize that. We are in a world right now where there's more of a multiple offer situation, but at the same time, that buyer pool is so specific for our listings. Right. Obviously marketing the property and making sure you're getting in front of the right people to show them and showcase the house and all of its benefits. For instance, when it comes to advertising and things like that, print timelines are often way too slow. We can't do print because the property is probably going to be sold by the time it goes to press. Doing things online, embracing social media, even though that's, we're not the TikTokers. We're probably never going to get on and dance, although I never
thought I'd be doing a podcast either,
right?
So you never know. Right?
Yeah. So that's important. The other thing we really reach back, and for me is so important, is having that quantitative data. We have opinions and backgrounds that people trust, and we have proven performance in what we do for our clients, whether it's on the buy or the sell side. But on both listing and buyer's market, those buyer's transactions, we pull quantitative data. We can't always be about the qualitative opinions because our opinions are great. We have amazing opinions and they count and they're based on facts and our experience. But at the end of the day, we also need to have some numbers. And from a quantitative standpoint, we present those to our client. And some of them love that and dive into the numbers and properties that are sold and the comps and square footage and anything that we can kind of pull together for them that makes sense for their purchase. And others just are like, great, it checks a box and they're so glad.
That's a really good point. I think every client's different, every property is different, every price range is different. And something that we have to do is really be able to acknowledge that and understand that and then work from there. Because we don't treat every property, every client, every situation the same. You have to adjust to who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. And that's something that our backgrounds have helped us.
Absolutely. I mean, some are hot dogs and some are bras. So we have to. We have to.
We'll let listeners' minds wander with that one, and we'll come back to law school. How's that, right? Is that,
and Natalie has an analogy for everything. So it's
or
the best,
movie reference.
It's the movie reference. It's the best quality.
So law school.
Yes.
Going through law school, were you focused then in commercial real estate? Did you know that that's where you wanted to practice law coming out of law school? How did that play out in the early part of your career?
For the most part, yes. I graduated from Southern Methodist University with a business degree in finance. And I knew I either wanted to go to business school or law school. This was... I thought I would go more the business route, actually, and I was focused in my undergrad studies in real estate finance and things of that nature. But real estate's always been a part of my life. My dad's a commercial real estate developer. He had me getting my real estate license at 18 when I was in Arkansas, and I worked with him a little bit, and it was just always a part of our life. I mean, we had hard hats on in the a muddy field, when I was in high school and younger. So I was always around that world. And I was interested in it, and it kind of fit. Well, I ended up going to law school. I started at SMU in Dallas. That's where I met my husband. He's from here. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. So we met there, and I eventually ended up transferring up here to Chicago because I knew we would likely get married, and we did. It worked out. Except I still give him a hard time about the cold weather every day.
And you should, you should. Yeah. And I'm from here originally, so you never get used to it.
Yeah. So in law school, I did focus on land use and eminent domain and all those things. And it just was kind of a natural fit and I was lucky enough to get a clerkship at Inland Real Estate Group in Oak Brook. And they ended up hiring me out of law school. And I really enjoyed it. And it was my background and all the things. But I ended up deciding I wanted to have a little bit different lifestyle and interact with people more. And
so for both of you to talk about that, because whether it be big Leo Burnett, right, big real estate investment trusts, big organizations, but really when you look now at your work, it ends up being the small team that you have. So making that transition. What was the catalyst for that? Like, what really took you down that path of saying, I want to go from the big organization, still real estate, but the big organization to saying, I'm actually going to set out on my own?
I don't think I realized what I was doing when I was doing it. I didn't realize it would be
Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
A good thing, for sure. Luckily, I think we're both self-starters. We're both hard workers. It worked out. It's working out. But it was a change for sure. I went from a company where literally I was having to, even though I was an attorney, I was having to check in, like log in, log out every day, to, essentially being an entrepreneur where you're working by yourself or with one other person. And it's a big change. I don't think I realized how big of a change it was going to be. Because there are days that -5 degrees outside and you don't want to get up and you don't have a showing to do that day, well, you still got to go to the office. You still got to show. It's you have to have a little bit more self. Yeah.
So was there anything specific you can look back on and say, yeah, but this is why I made the change?
Honestly, I think a lot of it had to do. I had my first baby and I was sitting at a desk from 7 to 7 and I wanted to be able to take her to school and pick her up from school. Now, I think I probably work more hours now than I did when I was an attorney, but it's a much different situation. It looks different.
And it's on your terms.
And it's, or my client's terms, but it's, our clients are we've been very blessed with good clients who are understanding. And that's why it's nice to have a partner. If I have to go to a music recital, she can cover for me or vice versa. And we also really are pretty set in our ways in that we want it to be just the two of us. And most real estate teams really grow and keep adding people. And we really like this setup. And it works for us. It works for our clients. You call and you get one of us, like she said earlier. Anyway, so it was a personal reason, I think. But then also professionally for me, again, I really like working one-on-one with specifically residential real estate clients because they're so grateful and you really see how you can make a difference. You do make a difference in their life. And that's been the biggest reward, I think, professionally for me at least. And most of those clients actually become our really good friends. Hinsdale's a small place. The Western Suburbs are a small place, and you are constantly, hanging out with your clients.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Your transition then. Natalie.
So I would say my transition had a little bit more of a catalyst and then was carried out because I did have a stepping stone between the Leo Burnett, Starcom ad agency side. I switched over to what we called in the business back then was the dark side. I switched to publishing, which meant I went to go work for one of the people who used to call on us. So I went to the publishing side. I worked a lot in print, having been on the tobacco accounts. I worked in broadcast investment, online, some radio, that sort of thing. But mostly it was print investment, given the tobacco nature of my first big account there. So I went to work for American Media, actually in New York City. So was working for publishing there, several different publications, including like National Enquirer, Star, which are historically very difficult to sell. But also I worked on their corporate platform. So American Media had just acquired all of the Weeder publications. It was like the couch potato meets the health enthusiast, which are very difficult to sell as a package, but I still managed to do it. So like a Nopi Street Performance Compact, National Enquirer, but then we also had Shape Magazine, Muscle and Fitness, Yoga Journal. Like it was quite the mix. So I did that, went into sales, stayed at American Media for a couple of years, and then transitioned over to a wonderful job at Marie Claire Magazine. So I worked at Hearst Publications for several years. I became the consumer products director there, which for a fashion and beauty publication, I was basically all of the non-intrinsic business. And that also tells me who I am today in terms of being able to serve the different needs of all these different clients, because consumer products is everything from, you're in everything from wearables that might not be luxury goods, your Unilever, your food products, your liquor, your automotive, your the financials. I called on New England there. So it was Cole Haan. So there were things that just kind of all fell into place. But again, working with a variety of different things and with people. But again, these are blue chip clients, not real people, when we moved back to the Midwest, to the Chicagoland area from 14 years in New York City, first of all, I knew that my job as a director at a magazine was, I took a break to raise some kids, and then I knew the job that I had there wouldn't really translate in Chicago, just because it's a smaller market and all the publishing hubs are in New York. So I said, okay, well, what can I do with this sales and marketing background? And loved real estate and had a good friend at the time, a builder, who when we were building our house, he said, you know what you would really be great at? And I followed it and got my license and didn't look back. So that all just kind of happened when I knew I wanted to go back to work, do something different, do something with real people versus just, spreadsheets.
In some of our conversations, we've talked about, for both of you, right? It's beyond the transaction of the buying or selling of a house and the relationship aspect. So if we fast forward or foreshadow for a few decades into the future, Coming back to this term legacy, then, what does that term legacy mean to you in your work? You both talk about your families and the kids and making decisions to figure out how you integrate the work with your family and raising the kids and being there for them. Share a little bit more about this legacy component.
I think professionally, whether it's short-term or long-term, I think for us, it's a reputation of running our business ethically, responsibly, having really great communication, just being good people, being good businesswomen. That's honestly number one, I think. And again, it's a relationship. It's not a transaction. It's a relationship that you form, and we're, like I said, we're friends with our clients. We rely on them for referrals. That's the majority of our business, and it's not just and also our relationship with our lenders and our attorneys and all the people we work with and other agents. It's very important to us that our reputation is stellar, and that's what we strive for, short-term and long-term in terms of our legacy. I think personally, I have 3 daughters, and I want them to understand that it's okay to have a family and be a full-time working mom, and that it's nothing. No one should ever make you feel bad about that, because oftentimes you feel like, oh, I can't talk about that I have children and I have this other life and I have this family. My client only wants to, talk about business, but it's okay to be well balanced and have that as a part of your world. And my dad raised me the same way, and I think that's my legacy I want to leave for my kids and grandkids.
Have you run into that personally? I mean, the way you
definitely when I was an attorney. Yeah, okay. But like I said, we've been really blessed with our clients, and most of them understand. And but yes, for sure. There's times where, you're ashamed to say, oh, I'm going to take my daughter in the middle of the day to a dentist appointment instead of being at the office or something like that, right? It's, you want to come across professional all the time. Whereas, I think we're pretty professional most of the time, but, we try to be real, and we try not to, lie about where we're at. But there is a pressure and a expectation that I think that are put on women in the workplace for sure. Just
differently than men.
Yeah.
Than your male counterparts.
Yeah, whether you intend to be that way or it's unconscious a lot of times for people, I think. But I think yes.
I mean, along the lines of, people think that teachers live at the school, right? People think that real estate agents just like live in their car ready to go at any moment, which we do. We do. We do within reason, but real estate is real life. And so we have to remind our clients of that sometimes if they're seeing a house and there's a stain on the carpet. Your kid never put a stain on the carpet?
Right.
Like, let's just calm down here for a second. So my legacy to my children and my grandchildren, get as much education as you have and do what moves you and what you think is important. Like I said before, I was an attorney and I made a switch into residential real estate. And like I said, I spent a lot of time and money getting that law degree, and it's still relevant and I still use it, but it was kind of a hard decision to switch and kind of give up that world that I worked so hard for and switch over to being a real estate agent. But I'm glad I did it. It worked out. It worked out. It worked out. But my point is, it's okay to make a switch. It's to my daughters or whoever. It's okay to make a switch. Go where your passions lie, and you'll figure it out one way or the other.
There's not a defined path of you just do these things. And even when there was decades ago of the climbing the corporate ladder or whatever that defined career path is, I just don't think that exists anymore.
Right.
As everyone is trying to figure it out and do what you want to do. And I've never liked the word balance. So I'm speaking at a conference next week, and the theme is like balancing. I'm like, no, I don't like it, because balancing implies that something's going to break. Something's going to fall and break. Yet how do you integrate? And what I hear from both of you is, how do you integrate? How do you integrate raising your family? How do you integrate, your friendships? How do you integrate your day-to-day work? And if it's integrated, it actually moves much more easily, and you're not at risk of breaking something or losing something or making a trade-off that you have to sit at the desk 7 to 7, right, practicing law, and something's breaking at home. How do you integrate? And I think that's what and what I encourage is that striving for, and that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Natalie, when you think about legacy, how does that strike you?
Well, in terms of legacy, like Anna said, with the long term and the short term, we do have to build like a quick rapport with clients. And when people often think about legacy, you think about something really long term that's built up over time, which is true, but we're kind of responsible for both the front end and the back end. Legacy in general has a lot to do with our work ethic. My work ethic, my kids always joke that how long is it going to take for mom to bring up that she worked at Chili's? But it's all about people who have actually worked, done a job. I don't care if you were mowing lawns, and I'm not talking about the little entrepreneur that goes out and mows a lawn. I'm talking about the actual physical activity of doing something. Working in a restaurant, babysitting, anything that you did when you were younger to help show people that you actually know how to work, you know how to get started. I think that there's a lot of kids that are coming out of college, even when I'm a little older than Anna, but even when we were graduating from college, people were so much more focused on an internship. Well, those internships are either passed along because daddy knows someone or you earn them. You never know. And I'm not saying that internships aren't great, but some people actually had to work and make some money and learn how to do that. My last year of high school, I worked at Chili's and worked my way all the way up from a hostess to a server to a bartender to a trainer, and did that all through college and made real money. And I never had an internship and still managed to get a great job out of school and make it to do all the right things now, I think, that have made my life happy. I'm not saying I have a perfect path or that it might work for someone else, but it certainly worked for me, and I'm happy with where I'm at. So that work ethic is so important to leave behind as a legacy for my kids. And to Anna's point, that you can pivot and change with what needs to happen. I wasn't going to come back here and take a lesser role, a demotion from what I was doing in New York here. That just didn't seem like a fit for me. I wanted to still be my own boss and have more autonomy in what I was doing. I've always been a bit more autonomous in general. So not having a direct boss is probably a good thing.
The work, I mean, it's like, sometimes you step back and you're like, I don't know what they're teaching at university anymore, right? Because it's like, it's all about problem solving. Whether it's Leo Burnett, a law firm or a real estate investment trust, or somebody buying a house and issues that come up, it's constantly solving problems, right? Untying knots, figuring out what the problem is and how do you get to a solution no matter what that is. And it takes work. It takes creativity, and then it takes the work ethic into that. And that just doesn't get taught in college. When people ask, it's like, if you say ideal client persona for us at Clearwater Capital is first generation entrepreneurial wealth, and those that think like that, meaning we've got multiple generation families, and the best families is not the trust fund kids, right, that are living off of it, but they think like they're the first generation wealth creators. Now, they may have had a head start in life in terms of where they're at, but they're still thinking about that because of the work ethic that gets instilled into them. And I hear when you talk about your daughters, it's about the values. It's not about the valuables, right? It's not about the wealth transfer. It's still really important in terms of how you do that. But the transfer, the human capital and the values component is what's going to pay dividends for families. And sometimes they miss that. They only think about the financial capital that gets generated from their entrepreneurial endeavors. But the human capital, the building into your families and the next generation and what that means, that's more valuable than
Absolutely.
A check.
Money
at the
comes
end of
and
the day.
goes, right?
Right.
But those values should not.
The values is what stays. Stays. So going from commercial real estate to residential, what was how would you compare and contrast those for listeners?
Obviously, negotiation, very similar, but you're dealing with, essentially people that don't have a personal interest in the product, right? Commercial real estate, they're making a deal usually for their company, for their clients, that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot of emotion. in the commercial real estate transaction, at least for the people the agents and the brokers and the other attorneys that I'm dealing with. The individual who's putting the money, yes, there's emotion, but working directly with the residential real estate client, it's super emotional. It's the biggest transaction they're personally going to make in their lifetime, most likely. It doesn't happen often, so they're not well versed in what's going on and what's happening, whether you're a very successful business person or not. You don't know what's going on as much as you maybe like to
report that you do.
Yeah. So that's different for sure. So there's a lot more hand holding in the residential real estate world.
Do you see a difference between someone's, maybe their primary residence, and if it's a second or a third, a subsequent?
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually an interesting situation right now too. A lot of people bought, second homes during COVID, and this is kind of an aside, but right now all the VRBOs and Airbnbs are kind of getting hit. The rental market's not great, and so a lot of those folks are having to, they paid at the high and they're not covering their costs with their with their investment for the rental rates. And so I foresee a lot, and it's already happening. A lot of those homes are being sold. And they're having to sell them. And so if some of your clients are looking for a second or third home, it's a good time for them to purchase, but only if they're not dependent on that rental income right now.
Well, so many people are investing in themselves and their families since COVID, and that's what came out of it. But yes, you have to.
Yeah, right. So, sorry, I kind of went off with your question, but what was your question?
So you were comparing and contrasting the commercial market
for the second and third
less
home.
emotions, and then just wondering, if a primary residence, thinking of that as the home versus a house.
Yeah.
Right. Second and third, you have a vacation house, vacation property, whatever it might be, or you're using it just as a rental. And we'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah,
too.
I think it depends on if it's investment or not. But yes, if they're getting a second or third home, it's very
less
different.
emotion.
Yeah. Well, they've been through the process, right?
Yeah,
and they. A lot of times one of the spouses cares more about that second or third home, whereas, they're both very invested in that first home purchase because that's where the majority of their time is being spent.
Yeah.
I do work in Florida. I'm a Florida license, and I got it during right during COVID because so many people in our area were going down to an area called 30A where I grew up going. And I saw people purchasing down there and like, oh my gosh, I know this area so well. I can't believe that I'm at least not getting a referral down there. So I got my license down there, and I've done some transactions down in 30A. And I would say it's a lighter transaction. It's a lighter feel of a transaction. I don't know why.
Lighter, less emotion.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's not as stressful.
I think it's also because they have that balance of enthusiasm as well. So they're so excited about this purchase and what's to come with their vacation property.
Yeah, right.
That's going to be a, more of a stress reliever, something that they can enjoy.
Yeah.
A toy. So not a toy, but when people get to that point, this is an add-on. It's a luxury. That second home is definitely a luxury.
So when we look at it from overall portfolio view, when you think about real estate in general, and this is from the UBS did a great report on in their 2024 family office report. Real estate around the world is usually about 10% of someone's portfolio. Parts of the world, it's a little bit more, parts are a little bit less. In the US, real estate is still about 10%. Now, it's primary residence, it could be second homes, it could be real estate investment trusts, it could be private real estate transactions and commercial that people own, but it's right around 10% of a total portfolio. So not an insignificant amount that comes into play. Then you end up with real estate families, and then you end up with, 40, 50% that they're in terms of the real estate holdings that they have or the partnerships they're participating in. So when you look at the different kinds of buyers, individuals buying a primary residence for real estate, but let's talk a little bit about the investor market. Some individuals that it's backfiring on them. They bought at the wrong price point. They can't even cover their costs. How would you evaluate the personality types? Because everyone thinks, I own a home. I'm a real estate investor. It's like, no, you're not. But there's that mindset at times. And I always encourage people, if you're going to get into real estate, you got to think of it as a business. Don't think of it as like this little side hobby, because you don't know what you're actually doing. How do you look at individuals and the ones that do well as real estate investors?
Well, on that front, I will say this. With mortgage rates having increased, I think the people who are doing well with investment real estate properties right now that they can purchase and either flip and resell, or they can purchase and rent, especially because we have such a lull. There are no rentals, and there's a lot of demand for them in our market, and there's just not a lot of them. Those properties that have been purchased with a higher interest rate, it doesn't work, because that model, these people are thinking, oh, I've got an investment property, but they used a mortgage to do that. And what they have to charge in terms of rent is so far above market value that people aren't going to be able to pay for it. And also the nature of a rental in general, I would venture, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but most people that are renting are usually having some sort of like change in their life or a financial distress. So they're not going to be able to pay out of pocket these monthly, rental rates. So that's just one thing that we've been seeing just in terms of investment.
Is it mainly people that were looking at it as a bit of a hobby, or I could get passive income, right? And I could all of a sudden have it, and they start looking at it, but they really don't know what they're getting into.
I think it depends on the market too, meaning the area you're in. I think it's little micro markets, right? If you're talking about Hinsdale, Illinois versus, Naples, Florida, that person's very different. Yeah, the one in Hinsdale, it might be a hobby because they live 2 doors down and they can have a few income properties that they can be the property manager for. But if you're looking at Naples, Florida, you have to have a real property manager, the insurance costs. Like, it's just a different mindset, I think, and it totally depends on the market you're looking at, for sure.
Right.
Because you're exactly right with I do think rates, though, are dropping. And for example, places like Florida, where the prices are coming down, you could say, if you hold on to it long enough, you're going to get some long-term appreciation, I think, for sure, especially if these prices are coming down. So I think it just depends on where you're looking.
Okay.
Well, also Illinois taxes aren't exactly something that we're trying to sell anybody on.
Right.
It is what it is. I mean, we're fortunate to, that we don't have the highest property taxes in the areas where we work, which is great. Not the highest, but I'm not saying they're the best.
I got a lot of clients down and talk about Naples, talk about Nashville, talk about, and they're like, why are you still there? Why are you still in the Chicago area? Family. I love family.
Gino's East.
Yeah, right. And all my kids are scattered. So moving from the investor part into kind of the issues that happen with families just because of the nature of life. Meaning people getting divorced, right? People passing away, the estate sale side of it, because these are big assets, right? If roughly 10%, again, in the report is focused on the ultra high net worth community, but roughly 10%, of course, they're going to have a primary residence and maybe another few properties in the mix, let alone true investment properties. But then life happens. Somebody dies, somebody's getting divorced, whatever. Where do you see where things were not handled well regarding ownership, titling, the legal documentation of that? You're not giving legal advice, nor are we, nor tax advice. Put all the disclaimers on here. But for individuals going, if when you're owning it and you get through the transaction, you got to still be paying attention to how this asset now fits into your estate structure.
Put it in a trust,
right?
Yes.
So tell us more.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and again, I'm not giving legal advice, but if it's in a trust, it's going to be a lot easier if that person dies, right? It's not going to get help
after they die. Not just go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, it's not going to get held up in probate, right? It's going to transfer hopefully much smoothly, and then also, I believe if it's in a trust, the trustee is responsible for keeping that property up to up to snuff, if you will, while it's being transitioned.
Yes, you can't have a lot of deferred maintenance, something that's sitting there. We deal with this a lot. And we I don't know what it is about it. I think it's because people like us so much and we are real and likable, and we can understand. We come from a place of empathy and sympathy when things happen to families. I don't know who said it first, but someone said one time, the 3 Ds, diapers, death, and divorce are the things that lead to, big moves. We also, in our area, we live in a highly transient area.
Okay.
So I would also say that relocation, just for job purposes, also plays into that a lot. And that one's a little bit easier to swallow. But when people are actively pregnant and knowing that their family is going to be expanding and they need more space, we've got a 9-month gestational period, right? So they're like, we got to move, we have to do this, we need more space. When someone dies, we're dealing with the emotion of that. Also with divorce, we deal with a lot of divorces. People do come to us to clean up. Sometimes we have to just strap on the hazmat suit and just get in there and figure out what's going to work best with these clients. And sometimes they're sometimes the two parties can be perfectly amicable and really good with communicating, and we just keep everyone in the loop. We never, whether it's a stressful life situation or not. Another thing that Anna and I are really focused on is making sure that we keep, everyone that is a primary seller or buyer in the loop simultaneously, because we would never expect for one of our clients to be parroting information back to the other spouse or whoever else, siblings if it's in a trust and they're selling. We want everyone in the loop directly from the horse's mouth. This is what's going on. Now let's talk about it. But we usually do that via text or email. Keep everyone in the loop. But yeah, these divorces have been tough. I mean, you're dividing assets, and most of the time, the house your primary home is going to be your biggest asset. And you have to figure out, I wouldn't say necessarily that we have a platform that works for this, but being able to sit down with our clients and discuss, okay, guys, this is what we need to do. We need to give you a value on your home. You're juggling a lot of variables right now. We realize that. A lot of the work that we do is completely free to you before we ever close a deal. So we're work. That's the nature of sales too. You provide everything up front. We give it our all the time, and develop that rapport with our clients. And most times that work ethic, most times it pays out. We also know our value. We know our worth. And we bring that to the table. And also being a confidant, an advisor, trusted advisors with our clients, that it comes into play. But these death, divorce, diaper, relocation situations are really.
We do not have a degree. Neither of us have a degree in psychiatry, psychology.
Yes.
But we've definitely learned it.
You're professional counselors.
And some have gone very smoothly, and others, we had a situation where clients were happily married, bought a beautiful historic home. They lived in it for a year, got their plans together. They were gut renovating it to its, just absolute pristine, beautiful. They were just deep into investments on this house. And when they were both outside the home while the home was being redone, divorce sets in, not amicable. So if we had a scale, I would put them on the far end of this is tough. And they needed to sell a home that the construction wasn't complete. They were arguing. One of the spouses was living in the home and making it very difficult to show. We ended up having to, when one divorce attorney comes to us and says, we need you to testify and say, it was things too. There were some needles in the house, and we came in one day to show we're talking a $3 million beautiful home, and there was a loaded handgun sitting in the middle of the kitchen island. So we needed to address this, we needed to address it. And when a divorce attorney calls, though, and I know the number one thing we need is for, that spouse to get out of the house so that we can show it properly and sell it, because that is what we were hired to do. I said, no, I'm not going to testify, because they're both my clients. That's a conflict of interest. Of course, then you get subpoenaed and things.
So you have no choice.
Then you have no choice, which definitely works out.
Those lawyers, right?
But, we are, fiercely protective of our relationships with our clients, but at the same time, we have to get the job done.
But they still both like us. So
yes.
That's good.
Yes. They recognize. Well, we always say, we will never judge you for things or the way you behave at or around the closing table, right? It's one of your highest stress times. Unless we're there when you're like pushing out baby number 5. Those are very stressful times. We will never judge anyone based on that. Like, this is high stress times. We are there for you. We get it.
When you say your value, and I want to come back to the trust item in a moment, because of how quickly you reacted to that, but to stay on this theme for a little bit, your value, and yet you can be pulled into certain scenarios that are not life-giving. They're a bit, life-draining. What's the ideal relationship for you? You want a relationship, not just transactions. You get to choose relationships. What relationships would you say no to? They're not a fit for you versus the ideal relationships that you really want to build into the future. Because it is. You're going to see them at the restaurant in town.
Right.
You're going to get referrals from them, which are probably going to be like them. So you want referrals from people that are like them. And you don't want that to be a lot of problems or
Right.
challenges. How do you discern relationships you engage in or homes you engage in?
I think it's really hard to tell from the get-go.
It is.
I mean, the nicest, most adorable people could end up being the most difficult to work with
Absolute
down the road.
house goblins.
Yes.
Wow, I never saw that coming.
So I think it's really hard to make that call in the very beginning. Yes, we have had to turn opportunities away, but they're few and far between. I
Yes.
think.
Well, and not to interrupt,
Yeah.
but I would also say that we've had situations, with colleagues who are attorneys or lenders, things like that, that we have referred these clients to, and situations where they've come back to us and said, "Where did you get this guy? Like, what is going on?" And at that point, we've also said, no one is going to be able to step in and help these people the way that we're willing to do it. We're going to put up with this because ethically, we're not just going to turn somebody out. If they're going through a tough time, and it might be real, and it's taxing because our work we do bring home. It comes home. Our husbands hear about it to a fault. It's my kids are a little bit older, so they do hear the ins and outs of just my moods of things, just kind of walking through it. But we also respect the fact that just because someone's going through something, there's some people who just see real estate as a very formulaic thing. Deals just kind of fall into their lap. And also a lot of these agents we're seeing kind of just disperse into other areas of business because it's not working out for them. For us, we have a true nature of wanting to help people and get them through those situations, which is probably why we do get so many.
And I think even within one transaction, a seller, a client might be super difficult negotiating the price, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm dreading this inspection review. They're going to be so difficult. And they're like, oh, fine, we'll fix everything they're asking us to do. And you're like, are you the same person that just negotiated this deal? So it's interesting how people care about the price, but then they don't care about the inspection items that they're going to do, and vice versa. So it's
Again, we listen and we don't judge.
Yes.
We listen. And isn't that the whole TikTok trend? Again, I'm not on TikTok.
It is.
We listen and we don't
could
judge.
do a whole thing on that.
If people want to pivot on their personalities and get things, we get it. It's high stress. We're not going to judge. That's also why it's great to have a partner, because then we can discuss it with each other and then
Vent with
never
one
have
another
anything.
and- yeah,
vent,
exactly.
done. Because otherwise, real estate can be very, isolating and polarizing. When you're just like one person, you have no one to bounce ideas off of, and having another professional. I mean, it's absolutely invaluable to have Anna.
Yeah.
And you have partners. It's when it clicks, it clicks, and it just kind of worked. I mean, who knew? But it worked, and it's been successful, and we get along, and we complement each other really well. And it didn't have to.
Right.
I always joke, I started dating my husband when I was 19 years old, and we're much older now, but I was like, we grew up together. That could have really not gone well. I said, luckily it worked out, but it could have definitely not, we could have definitely grown up.
My wife and I were 16 and 17 when we met, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone else in the world would have us, but you grow up together. It's like, we just know how each other operates.
Yes,
I
right.
know what you're going to say.
Exactly.
Not already.
She knows me way better than I know myself.
Right.
I'll
Totally.
defer to her on everything.
Yeah.
Back to the trust on an item. So we work with families, obviously in the estate strategy component of it, and some of it just gets down to basic titling and getting that in place. But it ends up being important items. And a lot of times the estate attorney should be taking care of and getting all of that in place anyway. But when it doesn't happen, or they're not circling back with the estate attorney when they just bought a new house, right? Didn't get around to that. Because in and out of trust at closing usually creates complications, especially if there's financing involved. But just having that titling there. When that doesn't go well, somebody dies, it's not in trust, paint a little bit of a picture for listeners regarding my loving reminders or my soapbox of why everything has to be titled the exact right way within the estate structure. Because when it goes wrong, it could be messy. Yeah. What are the case studies that come to mind for you when it gets messy after somebody passes?
Well, we've had two that specifically kind of dealt with that. One was an absolute nightmare, and one was only like moderately nightmarish that could be handled kind of on our level. One was a listing in Oak Brook. The mother had passed away. The home was owned by two brothers. Both brothers lived out of state. The one brother was, we always have to have very clear definitions of what people's roles are in each transaction too. So if we're dealing with a trust, we could have 6 or 7 kids of that person who passed away that we have to run everything by. And we get that. That's the way it has to be. Even though there's one manager of the trust who technically is the decision maker, in our experience, that is actually never the case when it comes to real estate. They all want to be involved. And it's just setting expectations. Look, we've got a trust sale going here, letting that buyer's agent or listing agent know that, we've got other people involved here. So just give us a little bit more time on communication.
Yeah.
This particular listing, we thought we had everything under control. It actually just got a little bit wild because one day the adult son reached out and said, my niece and her mom are going to come over to the house. They're going to pick up a few things that they wanted to get out of the house. And this wasn't even so much about the estate, but then it became that way. They brought with them a brother who had just been recently released from prison, who, when I went over there to take them through the house prior to a showing, he was leaving notes all over the house. Don't buy this house. It was absolutely out of control how people can act when they feel like, they feel like they have a piece of that property. And even though they were not part of the trust or even had any rights to ownership of that property, we were dealing with things like that and had to say, okay, you can't come in. On the buy side, we had a situation last January that a property our clients were buying, they were actually buying 2 properties that were right next to each other. One in the front, one in the back, contingent on, this one owned by 2 different people, 2 different agents, pulling all of that together to make it work. Fortunately, it was land. So we knew that we didn't have to worry about the structure so much, which was good. But being the buyer's agents on this, just keeping that balance going of making sure that we were able to do that contingency, because if our client has the back lot and not the front lot, that's not going to work. Right. The front property, they hid how many people owned the house. There was a mother and a father. Both had unfortunately passed. The father passed. He was the last living parent. He passed without having proper documentation. And the son that had been currently living in the house was just selling the house and going to move on. Okay. What we found out later was that, and from an obituary, we just felt like something wasn't going right. And our attorney on our end said, oh my gosh, I looked up the obituary and Mario is not one of 3 kids. He is one of 6. And we have to have everyone sign off on this. And we were supposed to be closing. It was such a nightmare. And on top of that, we'll call him Mario. I think it was either Mario or Margo. I can't remember. Besides the point, had taken out a HELOC on the property as well. So the listing agent had basically listed an undisclosed short sale. Okay. And no, she did not like it when I said that to her either. But it's true. She didn't do her homework. Like, you can't just drop things once the cycle starts, especially on something where someone has passed away. So we were like, okay, well, good news. 2 of the siblings have already passed away, so we don't have to get their signatures. Isn't that terrible? Great. But it becomes very simplified. Like, we have to get this. And then going through ex-spouses of people. Everyone needed to be explained that you're getting no money out of this. The buyer has to bring an extra $30,000 to closing just to close on this property. I'm sorry for your loss. Right. There's all these things, but it had to happen so quickly because we had another property. It was an absolute mess. And as agents, even though we're staying in our lane and not doing the legal aspect of it, never would we, but we understand it and we understand what needs to go into it. So we can at least provide suggestions and help.
Well, I think too, it's important. In Illinois, you have to have a real estate attorney close any real estate transaction. That's not the case for every state. I do really like that because it's important for people to get a really good real estate attorney because when you're closing that transaction, a lot of times they will have an estate attorney in the same office and they say, hey, let me put you in touch with this person. It'd be a really good idea for you to close this in a trust. So like we do refer out to a lot. We have good partnerships with a lot of real estate attorneys and it's important. It's a lot of times it's like, okay, why do I have to have an attorney? This is the title company can just shoot. But there's additional things such as that, putting your sale in a trust or your purchase in a trust that make a difference.
Yeah. Makes a huge difference. And because we're all the ones that have to deal with the benefits.
I can tell you're very passionate about this.
But, and it's because otherwise it ends up in dealing with courts, right? And unfortunately we end up seeing families. Sometimes we have part of the family that's clients working with us, or the family wasn't a client of ours beforehand, and the way things get tied up, whether it be real estate, whether it be business interests, go down the list. And you see it sometimes in court for years and years and years because the topic of wealth and the topic of money and these assets sometimes don't bring out the best in people, even though the parents would hope. We've had individuals that were in their 90s that were still editing their trust documents because they didn't like the way the kids were acting. The kids are like,
well, and after your
60,
parents'
70
death,
years old.
I mean, after your parents' death, that's not what you want to be dealing with.
No.
Right.
You know,
right. It's just make it clean, and do the entire process.
It's hard enough to
emotionally,
to clean out a property and to vacate a property that.
Yeah. So the more industry wide, right? So you talk about different markets, Florida, here, no matter where, right? Location. But then the industry went through some changes in 2024. So you mentioned it earlier, the National Association of Realtors, NAR, came to a settlement. Again, some of it is still being figured out, right? Some of it, various individuals, probably everybody's got an opinion on what was right, what was wrong. When I even went on the website to look at it, I think I mentioned to you, there's 121 frequently asked questions that were being addressed on the website. So there's 121 questions. That to me says there's more confusion than clarity if it takes that long to try to address what's going on. Can you share with listeners a bit of, and again, this is not you are experts, but also, somebody not coming back on, but you said, it's like, what transpired, what's out there? I know people can go and search it, but what's your understanding and take of what transpired last year?
So it's the big C word, collusion. That was what it was all about. And essentially the way things happened in the past is the seller's agent would put a cooperating commission fee that they would pay the buyer's agent on the MLS sheet. And the courts ruled that was collusion, essentially. So that can no longer happen. And so a lot of the buyers are saying, okay, so are the sellers not paying the buyer's brokers anymore? What's happening? Nobody knew what to do. And honestly, that even our companies were saying they haven't told us. The courts haven't told us yet what. So for a while there, we were just like, we don't know. And for the most part, I think it's going to be, so that was in the industry standard before, right? And I think what's going to transpire will also eventually, turn into an industry standard. And then there's going to be an argument. Is that collusion as well?
Yes.
So in our industry or in our markets, we have not seen any changes with the seller paying the buyer's broker. It's still happening, which is good news. However, we are having to have conversations with the buyer legally and having them sign forms stating, you'll pay us a commission, whatever that may be, if the seller doesn't pay you, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, it's kind of nice because, again, communication is key, and we're laying it all out there from the very beginning with our buyers. Whereas before, we'd get a call and the buyer would say, hey, a random buyer that we didn't even know would say, hey, can you show up and show us this property? And we'd say, yeah, and we'd show up and we'd hope that they stick with us as their broker or as our client.
Or didn't murder us.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's the other
right.
thing.
But now we're having to present with them a form stating, agency and what we will do for you, and that will you work with us in the Chicagoland area over this amount of time? Anyways, I think it's going to be better in the long run for everyone. But there was so much unknown for a while. And I do, again, back to Robert Revkin, the CEO of Compass, he has really pushed back on the NAR a lot. And I think in his world, if it happens, it will change a lot, and who knows what that'll look like. But he's an advocate of change, and things are really turning a corner in terms of the future. So,
well, I mean, being a registered investment advisory firm under the SEC, right? We're hugely regulated, and there's this like presumption that everyone is bad, even if you're doing it the right way, and you're doing it clean, you're doing it above board, you're doing more than the law says you should be doing. The presumption is, well, no, everybody's bad. And it's like, but the bad people are going to do bad things anyway. So for listeners where they may not have someone that they're working with that's presenting all the right documentation and the changes, and as the world evolves too, what should they be asking now differently, if anything, to find out, are you working with somebody that is credible and good and above board, no matter what the law says? They're doing it even that much better. You're doing it that much better. What are those questions that the buyer beware?
I'll let you answer that question. But first, I think it just needs to be, they're asking right now, do I even need an agent? That's what people are asking in general. Do I really need an agent? Because buyers are saying, you know what, am I going to be stuck with paying the bill now for my agent, which I never had to pay before? Okay. And that's a whole nother conversation that we can have, but of why you need an agent. But I think that's...
So give the short version. Give the short version now.
I think... One, when deals go good, it's because you had a good agent. When deals go bad, you really need a good agent, right? And all this regulation and I was sitting at my daughter's basketball game yesterday, and this man was sitting next to me, and he goes, I said, how did you decide? His daughter went to Catholic school, and I said, how did you decide between the public schools in Hinsdale versus the private school? And he goes, well, I bought a house, and it was, not even a mile from downtown Hinsdale, but I realized after we closed that it didn't go to Hinsdale schools. And I go, what? Like, how does that even happen? Like, who is your agent? Right. I mean, you need an agent, especially in these communities where, you don't know which schools are ranked the highest or not, he loves his Catholic school. But my point is that he had no idea what he was getting himself into. And you need an agent. These are the times that it matters, these little instances where...
And not even just an agent, but an agent that has proper geographic competency to sell those areas. So specifically where we live now, there's a lot of people that are wanting to move out of the major DMA just down the road and come into the western suburbs. And a lot of those agents are just selling in the suburbs, and they have literally no idea what they're selling. They can't tell you where the library is, where the grocery store is. Yes, they can look up some things, but there are some qualitative factors that they're just not going to know. And it is about relationships. And we have a lot of agents that we know that we might know about their pocket listings or things like that. I mean, it's all about what's out there. And there are a lot of cocky buyers who are like, I don't need an agent. Well, someone just came to us recently who his wife went and got her license just to kind of save them some money, I guess, and he's asking, they wrote a terrible offer on one of our listings. The husband called me 3 weeks after the property was already under contract with another amazing buyer and is proceeding to ask us for other pocket listings. And I said, respectfully, Mr. Husband, are you asking me to represent you as a buyer's agent, in which case we would be more than happy to provide pocket listings and off-market or private listings to you, but your wife is also an agent. So, and he's like, well, I'll hit you with a finder's fee or something. And I'm like, that's not how this works. There is value in what we have. So, this whole buyer agency thing too, for the people who know us, it's a no-brainer. Like, of course we'll pay this. We understand. Like, we have not seen, we work with several big real estate attorneys out here who have even said at this point that they have had no contracts past their desk yet that had the buyers paying that co-op. So it's kind of still sticking with no seller at this point really wants to be a pioneer and saying, nope, you're on your own. You're gonna have to, because it might hurt them. We don't know what's gonna happen. We're telling them that they have the option.
Right.
we're being honest about that, but so that's happening. But anyone who is a new buyer that's coming to us, which we do get a lot of those, because people don't understand agency. We try to explain it as best we can, but they don't know if we're the listing agent or the buyer's agent or some agent that was just assigned to them on Zillow or Redfin. They don't know.
Right.
And most of the time they don't care. So when we're trying to present this documentation to people we've never met before, and hoping they don't kill us, because we work with a lot of strangers that just call you up. There's a lot of weirdos out there. Right? We not a lot, but still, we have to be careful. We don't want to be on the news. So, you're trying to present this documentation to someone who doesn't know you, doesn't trust you. You have no rapport yet, but we got to get it done. Yeah. So it's awkward sometimes, but.
And they don't care about that 120 FAQ that's on the.
They don't have time for that.
They just want to know how it affects them, right? And we want to know how it affects us. Which is probably the 120 FAQs.
Right. Yes. All of those frequently asked questions are agents.
I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about agents being paid hourly, and I thought that was so interesting. I was like, oh my God, that would be terrible, because it would turn it completely into a transactional. The relationship, they would be scared to call us.
Yeah.
They would never call us.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Even real estate attorneys, attorneys that close real estate transaction, majority are flat fee. They don't do by the hour in real estate transactions, which is great, because we just couldn't do that.
Yeah. You focus on the quality of the product.
That's right.
Too, and not just punching the time clock.
Mm-hmm. But we get that
like
question
walking into the old. Well, we won't mention the name, right? But walking in and punching your time card for your early in your law career with them. All right, so I want to talk about community involvement, but then to come back, because the world is changing, right? Technology is changing, what people can use as tools and information flow, and how that plays out. But you've mentioned it a couple times, right? And I do think about physical security, because there are a lot of weird, right? And there's the aspect of like, I wouldn't want to list something on one of those online marketplaces and have somebody showing up at the house and knowing where I'm at, and just, you have to think differently in the world today than you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. How is the world changing for you to still feel secure and confident in doing your best work? How do you approach that? How do you have to operate differently today than maybe when you started?
Well, we are very fortunate in that there is, in terms of safety, agent safety, that we can. There's basic things that we would never do. If we were with a stranger showing a property, we would always invite them to walk in front of us, going up the stairs or going into a doorway, going down into the basement. Once again, like, we don't need like our own Law and Order episode, right?
Right.
So, we're cautious of that. We don't ever get too busy to not take our own safety into account. And whenever we are meeting different people, we have a shared calendar. And again, a benefit of just having a business partner and friend that we share our calendar through our phones. We know exactly where the other one is if we're ever meeting someone that maybe we're just not sure about. Not that we're saying there's anything wrong with them, but we just don't know them at all. And we just want to make sure that they are a bona fide
She'll text me,
buyer.
if you don't hear me by 10:30, SOS.
Yes. So then we have to make sure too that we're just checking our phone and be like, all good, everything's fine. But we do that. We have a website that we can go to as well, all agents, as part of NAR. I believe it's NAR that offers that, or maybe it's each of the brokerages that pay for our subscriptions to it. But through Compass, we have what's called forewarn.com, where we can go in and type someone's name in or their cell phone number, and we can just kind of get an idea of,
who you're dealing with.
Who we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And are the things that they're saying, are they checking out? When they say that they currently live in St. Charles and they're relocating to the area, just little checkpoints. Now, there's always going to be some things, and there's going to be some things that aren't entirely accurate, but we go from there. And knock wood, we have not had any situations yet.
The western suburbs are a pretty safe place.
Yes. Yes. Now, we do get every so often the person who is not at all qualified for anything and act like a complete nut, and I tend to be a magnet for that.
You really do.
We're not mentioning any names,
but we have to, but we do have to treat everything with full, you never know what's going on. We're trying to do our best, but there's, license law prevents us from asking certain things.
No discrimination.
No discrimination. So if someone is acting really quirky, or they're just not having the right, just some of the things don't add up. We still have to do our job, and
So let's go to the other end of the
Yes.
spectrum, right? Let's end on a really positive note versus that one. You're both heavily involved in your community.
Yes.
Right? You mentioned churches, community, giving back, the boards that you sit on. You're really involved in the community. Your neighbors, the people you're selling houses to, are all that. How important is the philanthropic aspect to what you do in giving back, to the community at large? How important is that to you, and where do you get the most joy out of it?
So I moved to the suburbs really young, without kids. I was married, but I knew one person in my town. And so I immediately got involved with a junior women's club that exposed me to a lot of the local charities and philanthropies in the area. And I was raised always, doing things where we gave back through the different organizations and church and things like that. But I was able to be pretty quickly ingrained amongst the organizations in our backyard, which was great because it was a stepping stone in kind of a overview of all the organizations, say, oh, I'm really interested in that one, or I really want to put more time there and whatnot. So I was able to get in while I said while I was young, to some of these organizations. And I was lucky enough to be there long enough where I sat on the board of the Wellness House in Hinsdale, which serves cancer patients. And I also, my youngest daughter is adopted from China, and she has she was born with a cleft palate. So my daughters and their cousins, we have done some things for Operation Smile. And as of late, we have become more involved in the Daniel Murphy Scholarship Foundation. My daughter loves to play golf, and that's a scholarship for young golfers. And so that's been great. So it's been fun to, as my daughters have gotten older, to bring them in on things that they're interested in and that I was interested in, and just really show that that's a big part of our world and it's important. And so I don't do it to network, but it's been a nice networking tool as well.
Yeah. Well, it's back to the integration piece, right? I mean, so living there, it's doing things, your lived experience with your daughters, things that are important and needed, and their interests, and that continuity. I mean, that just, it's got to feel great, and talk about that joy. And then, oh, by the way, if you develop relationships and people get to know you, who you are, and they want to do business with you, what's wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that ultimately, that's going to attract much better people than maybe some of the other cases you mentioned that were cold calls.
Well, my husband and I, and I'm lucky enough to have a partner that believes this as well, and kind of it's just be good people, be good humans, right? And do things that make you feel good and help other people. And we try to do that with our business. I mean, I'm not trying to we're great people. I mean, we try. I mean, we're not perfect,
No one's
right?
perfect. No one's perfect.
But we really try. And I think that that's the number one thing. And whether it's through your faith or your experiences or whatnot, it's how we try to run our business and our lives.
It's the thing about real estate is that it is such a public job, and it's so many layers of who we are and what we do and our pictures. And we joke all the time. We're like, oh my gosh, we have to get more headshots, or we have more pictures going today. We're like so excited to have an actual audio element right now because, and we did our makeup and everything too, but that sort of thing. But being a part of the community it's just a layer that you have, a well-seasoned layer that makes us who we are. And it's totally natural that we would be involved with our kids' schools. Those are the kind of people that we are. Now, I will say there are some parents that don't want to get involved in school. Both of us have always been usual suspects to say, yes, call us up if you need help with anything at the school. At our churches, it makes sense that, we're not just the Sunday goers. We give it a little bit more. We give more to the people in our community and all of that. For me, similarly, I've gotten involved with some charitable organizations very organically. We do have to, kind of pick and choose what we're involved with because we don't have limitless time.
We have to say no sometimes.
Yes, and what we don't want to do is water down and dilute what we're doing for other people and other organizations. We'd rather be all in. on something that's really important to us. And there's going to be other people that we can encourage to be parts of other things.
Yeah.
For me, I've always been very involved with Brightpoint, which used to be called Children's Home and Aid. It's Illinois only. It's a lot of foster families and foster children, programming, early childhood centers, things like that. I love that it's very micro local to, Illinois. It's most of the time not really pretty. We raise a lot of funds and we do a derby party every year. But what we're doing is very nitty gritty. And, we fortunately, we have a corporate group that works downtown because it is part of social services as well. So we answered, our auxiliary in Hinsdale answers to a larger group, which is nice to kind of have that touch point and baseline. They tell us what they need, and then we raise unrestricted funds, which is amazing. And then Elmhurst Hospital, I work a lot with them. I think naturally having 3 boys, we've had so many broken bones
visits
and accidents that it all came about very organically when I joined that foundation to raise money. I think I'm the only, the token non-medical professional on the board, which is always pretty funny. Most everybody else has that background.
Yeah, but you have, with 3 boys, you had the other the home nursing skills that were needed to get them through.
The triage to get them down the street to Elmhurst Hospital.
Well, and I agree with your point, and I encourage people all the time on the philanthropic, right? Giving of your time and talent first, and what that looks like before you give it the truth. Before you just writing checks, don't write a bunch of checks to a bunch of different charities, right? Make sure you know that. Make sure you understand that. You're spending and investing your time and giving of your energy and giving of your intellect into what that organization is doing. And then fewer and deeper is way more powerful to move the needle than just trying to spread a little bit all over the place. And you don't even feel good about that, right? It's like, where do you go deep to make a difference? And that ends up bringing, I think, a lot of personal joy and satisfaction. So as we wrap up here, put you on the spot with words of wisdom, but I want you to think about a few different audiences that might be out there. Somebody earlier in their life, career, that could be looking at it going, I want to be in real estate. How would you encourage or discourage or make them aware of, eyes wide open? Somebody that has, like you both had, you were, I would say mid-career, because that sounds a little bit weird, but it was a significant of a career shift and change with you both coming into what you're doing now and putting on an entrepreneurial hat and doing away with some of the corporate support and everything else that comes with that. What would you encourage to those individuals about taking the step? And whether it being into real estate as you are, or something else and pursuing something that is really a reflection of who they are. How would you speak to those 2 different audiences in closing? And you can decide who goes first.
I could go first. Okay, so I would say, in speaking to someone who's brand new to the industry, and I would say that might be a younger person who's saying, I don't have a career path yet, I'm thinking about doing this. Those people just need to really make sure that they're going to be the go-getters. They can't, you can still make your schedule. It's like 2 homes might have the same square footage, but their layout is completely different. You have to figure out what your roadmap is going to look like for your daily life or your weekly life when it comes to work in real estate. So you have to make sure you're completely committed to the process. Make sure that you're good with people. Make sure that you're able to know that you're not going to be a complete curmudgeon. I feel like sometimes people, and this is, a terrible analogy, but like some people are just absolute social hand grenades. Like you throw them into a thing and they don't know what to say. They don't know. It's like, all right, whoever has the worst people skills, you're on phones today. And I know that we've all called those places that I'm like, how did you get this job as a receptionist? Like you cannot come off script for 2 seconds, which is another thing. You have to be able to pivot and shake. We say this, that anything, we can handle anything because we know how to pivot on different things and just get the job done and get it done well and make sure that people are satisfied along the way. So for that new person, they just have to have the grit. They have to have the grit. There's some things that take no time or talent in order to get done. Yeah. And then there's things that you just have to wake up and know that you're going to do the job. Yeah. Now, to someone who's looking, again, to try out a new career path, something different, they just need to understand that this does not fall into their lap. People look at real estate agents, and it's hard because our market is so saturated with realtors, and a lot of the really, I'll just call them quirky ones, get a lot of notoriety with doing dances on TikTok or whatever. But, we don't know how much business they're actually doing. Like, ours is client by client, week to week. It's always changing. We don't have a platform that is all things to all people. You have to be willing to do the work and put yourself out there, have conversations. I can't tell you the number of clients that we've picked up just from having conversations. The people that don't know us. People that know us come to us. They that's a natural fit, but you're going to have to work outside your sphere too, and you're going to have to be comfortable in your own skin to get out there and do things like a podcast that you would not normally be doing.
I'm so glad you didn't take my answer. I would say for both instances to find yourself a really good mentor. I was lucky enough to join up with a woman, Tina Porterfield, who had been in the industry for 40 years, and she took me on as her mentee, and she really talked about her legacy and reputation. She just has the best legacy and the best reputation in the industry amongst all agents and all people that are in the industry. And like you said, it's a really hard industry to jump into. When I first jumped into it, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a 10-year plan. Like, it's going to take a long time to get, the notoriety. And she luckily included me on all of her marketing and all of her properties right away. So it turned a 10-year plan into more like a 5-year plan, where after being with her for 5 years, I was able to really be on my own. I decided not to be on my own, but I could be on my own. I was getting my own business, not just through her. So having a mentor, really changed my trajectory in the real estate world. And if you're looking to come over and make a switch, have somebody you trust, have somebody you can, ask ideas, bounce ideas off of, and, ask the real hard questions.
I don't know what it is about the 5-year mark, but just from pure observation, right? Unscientific.
Yeah. Somebody
from academia is probably listening, and they're going to come up with a white paper on it. But it's like that 5-year mark for anyone engaging in some kind of an entrepreneurial venture, whether it's early career, starting a new business, whatever it is. You better be planning for at least 5 years. Kind of that 5 to 10 year zone from it being R&D and experimentation to being a reality. If your runway's shorter than that, or you don't have the capital to get to that point, you might need to be rethinking it. So there's something about this 5-year mark.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, just
and have some thick skin, right?
Thick skin is
yes, and work ethic and go through it
and all the things you said. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you both for spending the time in this
was
conversation.
So fun. Thank you.
Walking through it, sharing your perspective, sharing how would people get in contact with you if they're thinking about the western suburbs, they're thinking about a move, buy, sell, second property, whatever it would be. How do they get in contact with you?
They can go to our website,
which is?
It's AFNR Homes. So
.com.
AFNR.
Homes.
Anna Fiascone, Natalie Ryan. Homes.
Alpha November.
Alpha. Well, this is fun. Now I don't know my alphabet. It's AF like Frank or Fiascone.
Yes.
N like Natalie, R like Ryan.
There you go. Okay.
Homes.com.
HOMES, right?
HOMES.com. That's the best way. And then all of our contact information is on there.
Perfect. Thank you again, both.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the spring season here and the conversations that may happen. And here we go. Listeners, thank you so much for listening in to Anna and Natalie today. Understanding from the perspective of what does it really mean to not just have a house, but a home? What does it mean from raising their families to working and living it out in their community? What a great conversation. If you want to continue it, please send us an email at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Have a blessed day.